Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what was going on. It pooped. So I'm not exactly sure what point it pooped. I looked over and it was frozen and my face was like, eh. Why does it always do that? Why do videos have to freeze on like an ugly face? Like, why couldn't it freeze on me going like, oh, I'm so cute? No, it's got to freeze on me looking like a crazy person. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure where it froze, but when I pulled this box out, I saw this. I've never seen anything like this before. So as you see, it is like a skirt, right? Now this is the instant pleated skirt. And it says, to complete pleated skirt, measure your waist, cut waistband 3 inches longer than this measurement. Bottom edge of skirt is pre-hemmed. Length of skirt should be altered from the top. Measure desired length from bottom hem up towards the waist. Cut off excess length of top. Yeah, like this is literally like a skirt to go. And I don't quite, I mean, it seems like you'd have to be a certain size for this to work because it doesn't look like there's enough fabric here for but there's a waistband, and I guess you would trim the total circumference of the skirt as you need it and sew it up and then put put a zipper in, and then there's the waistband. What an interesting thing. I've never seen anything like this. And does it say it's wool? It's a wool poly acrylic blend. Now I know at the store now you can buy, it's usually in the summer, they have them in there for sundresses, and it's like the fabric is as long, I think it comes in like half size for children and like little tops, and then the long size for women. But it's got like a band of about that much that is sheared, so it's like it's gathered with elastic thread, so it's stretchy, and it's kind of like one size fits all. And so you'd buy that in however wide you need, and it's like it's already kind of done for you, right? A tube top, yeah. And then you could put, you know, straps on it if you want. That's the closest thing I can think of to this, like, you know. But yeah, I just have never seen any. I mean, have you guys ever seen anything like this? I mean, it looks like this is all stapled together, so you definitely buy this like this, and you know they never made it. So what an interesting thing. I have a whole bin of like kit projects, and not so much. Well, I have some vintage and antique quilt kits, kit quilt things, but I started picking up things like, not quite latch hook rugs, you know, but like those kind of little sewing kits and the weird things that they are. This kind of fits in there. I have a couple of items that are like, you know, sewing, clothing related stuff. Yeah. So, there's a nice zipper. You know, zippers are very expensive. This is a 24-inch heavy jacket zipper. You know how much that will cost you now? Like a lot of money. Well, like probably $10 or $15. So, yeah, this strikes me as very 1980s. Maybe 70s, but yeah, definitely 1980s. I mean, this is when kilts and plaid skirts were big business, in my opinion. I don't even see. This thing doesn't even have a company name on it, so. My plan is one day to write a book about that kind of stuff. Now this is pretty fabric. Look at this. This is some old polished cotton. Now it looks like it's got a stain on it, but look at that. Isn't that pretty? It's sort of a grayish blue. And then it's got this little bright splashy, but it's a polished cotton. And it's kind of got that, it's got a chintz feel to it, although it is not chintz. a whole bunch of gray corduroy. This is a very interesting kind of fabric. It's not seersucker, but it's kind of like a seersucker. Can you see that it's got like a sort of like a zigzaggy kind of texture to it, but it's little bunnies. That's really cute. It's a very strange fabric though. And this is cute. If I remember correctly, the lady had been making those bags that you hang up and stuff plastic bags in. And so I think that's what this fabric was from. This is a scrap of it. Because I saved, I remember when I got this, I saw one of those finished bags and I was like, ooh, I could use that. So I remember grabbing it out, and I think it's out of this fabric. And the rest in here appears to be zippers and a tablecloth of some sort. Ah, this is interesting. Let me show you that in a second. Let me make sure there's nothing else in here. Yeah, just zippers. But look at this. A pleater. This looks like this lady must have loved pleated skirts. So this says, make your own side or box pleats. Bacca brand, 49 cents, 40 inches long. So I guess you would take this and tuck. Well, it's already sort of open, so let's just go ahead and open it the rest of the way. Yeah, look at that. So I guess you take this off and then you tuck the fabric in there and then I guess press it. Does it say? Cut, please. Oh, it's buckram. This is buckram. Okay, so your material is 3 times the length that you need it to be. And, oh, so okay, so this is some type of tape. So you're supposed to peel that off, and then you spread this out, and then you stitch it down. And I guess it pleats it, but you pleat it back together before you stitch it down. Well, isn't that interesting? Wonder of wonders. Would you be able to find something like this in the fabric store? Not a chance. These kind of things that they made back in the day were just so interesting. And like, you wouldn't be able to find something like that anymore. All right. Well, that was fun. I hope that was enjoyable. Never know, you know, looking through other people's junk. May or may not be interesting or fun. I don't know. All right. So what do you guys say? Oh, hey Eva, box pleats are fun to make. Yeah, they can be, unless you have to make like a trillion of them. Or if you're not good at measuring or getting things even. I know that can be a beast for some people. Myself included. I'm very bad at measuring stuff, so. Okay. So, you ready for some chintz? Where we last left MacGyver, he was talking about, I believe it was the 18th century. And then we got through the 19th century. So we're going to be on chapter 5 now, which is the pioneers of English cotton printing. Okay. Box pleats are more forgiving than regular pleats. Yeah. I guess so. Yeah, because I don't know. I'm not a pleat person unless it's something cute like a top. Because pleats and skirts and pants are not good for this body. But although pleats are good for things other than clothing. So okay. Well, let us get into our MacGyver. As a reminder, we are reading the Chintz Book, which was written by MacGyver Percival, I wanted to think that he was some exciting, flamboyant Scotsman, but I think he's just some posh English man. I still can't find much information about him. He he wrote these antique books, and that's kind of what I know about him. Yes, Eva, yes, you have that right. You measure that middle point and then you fold them in. All right, so The Chintz Book by MacIver Percival, 1923. We're on chapter 5, Pioneers of English Cotton Printing. A little hydration. All right. The early history of cotton printing in England is somewhat obscure. No doubt here, as elsewhere in medieval times, block printing on fabrics was used as a cheap means of obtaining a decorative effect for wall hangings and even for garments. It would not be at all difficult for any printer to transfer simple patterns to suitable material using pigments and an egg medium, which would give body to his colors. But the results produced by such methods were quite distinct from real chintz printing. Such printing as that carried out by Jerome Lanier, who in 1634 patented a method of printing a design in size or glue on silk, cotton, leather, or other substances. The pattern, while wet, being sprinkled with ground up wool or silk, producing a result evidently akin to flock paper, cannot be considered as even an attempt to imitate chintzes. The aim was evidently to produce a cheap substitute for velvet and other similar fabrics. So that's interesting. They flocked it with ground up wool or silk. There were also coarse outlines printed on canvas and other materials, filled in by hand with rough splashes of color, which served, no doubt, to bring a measure of warmth and comfort to drafty rooms when owners could not afford anything more beautiful. These again were more probably inspired by tapestry than the Indian chintz. The date generally given to the earliest calico printing works in England is 1676. And in that year, a grant was given to one Will Sherwin to print on broadcloth the only true way of East India printing and staining such kind of goods. The only way. So the picture we'll look at here is a wall hanging printed on canvas, English 17th century. So we're going to say, I guess if calico printing 1676, this might be then-ish. So here we go. On this just looks like a block printed thing. Not particularly chintzy at all because you see those figures in the bottom. Then in 1669, we get a reference in the correspondence of the East India Company to a great practice of painting large branches for the hangings of rooms. These may have been on textile fabrics or on paper. It is impossible to say. In 1690 was established a printing works in East Sheen, now known as Richmond, which was said to have been founded by a Frenchman. There was also a large print works at Bromley Hall in Essex, which must have been one of the earliest, because when a duty was first imposed, it stood number 1 in the excise books. We know nothing of the kind of work executed at these places, but almost certainly it would be copied from the less important types of small Indian patterns, such as were used for dresses and other garments. The printers could not attempt the large panels, which would call for more skill in the use of dyes than they could be expected to have attained at this time. Very possibly the only really fast colors they understood were a reserve of white on blue and perhaps the madder dye. I don't know what he means, a reserve of white on blue. I'm guessing he means like some type of resist. A most interesting old trade card at the end of the 17th century shows a printer at work on a large repeating pattern in which a kind of flower with a cross in the center is being impressed at intervals on the lengths of cloth. And I think this was from the other day we saw this. Um, Yep, here it is. Just look at that real quick, just as a reminder. Pretty cool trade card. Shows the guy printing. And this is what it says. Jacob Stamp, living at Ye Sign of the Calico Printer in Houndsditch, prints all sorts of calico linings, silks, stuffs, new or old, at reasonable rates. Oh, I like how they spell old. O-U-L-D. Ord. So runs the announcement. Though willing to undertake any job that came his way, Stamp was clearly principally a printer of calicos. He was a fashion printer. That is to say, he did not provide the material on which he worked, but the calico or other stuff was brought by the customers, who only paid for its decoration. That is interesting. In much the same way as gold or silversmiths of those days would take silver brought to them and make it into whatever was required, or, if he provided the metal, charged for at its current rates per ounce, plus so much fashion. Yeah, that's interesting that these printers did not, I guess, maintain a store of fabric. They were only printing on what you brought them, so they were not fabric dealers. Very interesting. These printers, however, must have done a very second-rate trade, working mainly for middle-class patrons who could not afford the costly imported fabrics so much desired by all. In all probability, they only printed the black outline, the fillings being patiently added by hand, or, at all events, only one other block would be used. However that may be, whether the cottons were of Indian decoration or merely English copies, the effect aimed at was the same clear grounds and brilliant colors in the patterns, and no doubt the nearer the English printers got to their models, the better they pleased themselves and their customers. All the cotton material which was used by English printers was imported, but of course the linen was home woven or imported from Holland. With the home printing trade in its infancy, the advocates for the protection of the wool and silk weaving industries practically ignored it as a possible rival. Bad idea, folks. It was so far from perfection that there seemed very little to fear from it, and it was left out of their arguments. We may therefore be sure that the English calico printing there was in the 17th century was so small in quantity and so far from fine in quality that no danger was apprehended from it. All their efforts were directed towards the crushing of the East India trade. Calicos and wrought silks are the things I chiefly aim at, and hope to make it plainly appear that those two commodities do us more prejudice in our manufactures than all the advantage they bring either to private purses or to the nation in general. And if it were to be wished, the wisdom of our Parliament would prohibit their being worn in England, else, like the ill-favored lean kine, they will destroy the use of our manufactures. So runs a diatribe by Sir Josiah Child of London, writing in 1699. Oh, the ills of our day! Imported cottons! There is nothing in this that shows any effort to attack English calicos, and they were ignored by the silk and woolen merchants. Not, we may take it, from patriotic motives, but simply because up to the time when Indian decorated cottons were forbidden entry into the country, English printers did not menace their trade. So the footnote regarding Sir Josiah Child's diatribe says this was a discourse concerning the East India trade, showing how it was unprofitable to the King of England. So I'm guessing he was telling the king on the East India Company. If, however, the weavers of wool and silk hoped that, when the Indian chintzes were forbidden the country, they would have the market for materials for dresses and for furnishing purposes entirely in their own hands, and that, being without opposition a time of unexampled prosperity lay before them, they were speedily disillusioned. For a short time, indeed, they only had the smuggled Indian cottons and the comparatively small quantity of calico printed in England as rivals to their goods. But English people liked those painted calicos and were determined to wear them. The rich paid enormous sums for smuggled goods, and the English and Dutch printers rapidly increased and improved their output, so that the weaving trade benefited little by the prohibition of their Oriental rivals. We find, in spite of the laws against them, entries and inventories of painted calicos and descriptions of dresses of the same material. But at first the weavers do seem to have made a little headway. Thus, in a pamphlet entitled The Weaver's True Case, published in 1719, the writer says, "Let us cast our eyes backward 15 years, that is to say, to 1704, when the prohibition of calicos decorated in India had been in force for 4 years, and to see with what commodities our womenkind were then clothed. We shall see that our women among the gentry were then clothed with fine English brocades and Venetians, our common traders' wives with slight silk damasks, our country farmers' wives and other good country dames with worsted damasks, flowered rustles, and flowered calamanicos, and the meanest of them with plain worsted stuffs. Whereas now those of the first class are clothed with outlawed Indian chintz, those of the second with English and Dutch printed calicos, those of the third with ordinary calicos and printed linen, and those of the last with ordinary printed linen." So the absolute dregs of society are wearing ordinary printed linen. How absolute dare! The sumptuary stuff is just, it's shocking to me. Because this was definitely about the haves, the haves and the have-nots. This is very interesting. This is a very interesting extract because it shows the rate of esteem that was accorded to the different kinds of decoration. The European printers being as far behind their prototypes as slight silk damasks suitable for common traders' wives were behind the finest English brocades in which the wives of the gentry were clothed. Tell us about the outlawed fabrics. It seems odd to us that printed linen should come so far behind cotton, but doubtless the colors were inferior. However, it was not long before the demand produced the supply, and the use of decorated cottons again became general. A rather amusing reference to the esteem in which the fashionable garb was held is made in the doggerel verses accompanying a print, The Tea Table, published in 1710. It shows 6 ladies talking scandal and drinking tea. The tea table is chief seat of slander ever there we see. Thick slanders circulate with right bohea. No idea. Various characters are passed in review, and finally of one it is said, "Be dumb, she'll never consent, she'll die sooner, or wear her she'll sooner die, or wear her painted calico awry." As if death was the only misfortune which could equal a mishap to her fine gown. Okay, so the outlawed chintz of India. Yeah, so they basically Parliament and the other people were basically saying that the East Indian import of these chintz fabrics was not good for the home production. So basically 1700 they outlawed the import of these chintzes. I don't think necessarily so that English and Dutch chintzes could have a better chance, but I think just so that the home fabric producers, like the wool industry, wool was like a huge English industry. So that's really what it was about. It was, not letting that Indian chintz come in, so that the home weavers would have a better chance. But that didn't work out so well. Two of the fair scandal mongers are represented in negligees of cotton. No, it didn't have anything to do with the dye. It was about trade. It was totally about trade and about preserving the craft of the homeland versus bringing in the chintz. And also, I mean, it was a sumptuary thing, the higher quality people could afford this stuff. And obviously the very top level of people were just getting the smuggled stuff. So 2 of the fair scandalmongers are represented in negligees of cotton, one patterned with all over floral sprig, the other with a delicate piqué design. The use of Indian chintzes and their English imitations continued and grew, giving rise to riots during which mobs of weavers and their supporters attacked ladies who were wearing printed cottons, tearing the hated fabrics from their shoulders and otherwise ill-treating them. Wow. Can you imagine? Well, I mean, people attack those who wear fur. So, 'tis true, those women, boys and girls, which belong and depend on the weaving trade, cannot endure to see any calico gowns pass in their streets unmolested, which might be prevented if women would put on other clothes when they go to those parts of town. Right? But it would certainly appear to be a very wise precaution to take. But, oh gosh, here's some French. I don't know. Il faut souffrir pour être belle. I don't know. I can't even begin with the French. But anyway, it was better to have a torn frock than appear out of fashion. Was evidently the opinion of these calico madams, as they were called. So, yeah, you might have it torn from your body, but God forbid, you're better off to wear this, yeah, the outfit that people wanted to tear off your body than to appear out of fashion. Okay, so this, what we'll see next, is a design copied from an Indian cotton, English, late 18th century. And this is very, like, what I would really think of as early chintz, and it is early chintz. And this, I think, is why when I think of chintzes, I don't love them, because it's this kind of, it's like some vines and stuff. Like, meh. Round the controversy, a considerable literature of pamphlets and broadsides grew up for and against the weavers. Okay, ill thought means it is, I don't even know how to pronounce that. F-A-U-T. The next part of it is SOUFFRIR. Pour is for, P-O-U-R. Etre, E-T-R-E, I guess is that the bell? B-E-L-L-E, of course, is. Yeah. Druid always loves to translate for me. Let me know if you need me to type it in. I will. All right. So pamphlets and broadsides. Here, let me type them in for you. You know what? I can't, because I'm gonna hold it up. I'm gonna hold it up, and you take a screenshot. It's at the bottom here. Can you see that? Il FAUTSOUFFRIR pour être belle. Okay, hopefully you got it. It's not the end of the world if you don't have a chance to translate that. But we do know they're called the Calico Madams. Okay. So pamphlets and broadsides. Many interesting particulars as to the kinds of cotton used may be gleaned from these writings. For instance, a brief statement of the question between the printed and painted calicos and the woolen and silk manufacturers in the Kingdom of Great Britain, 1719, gives us the information. It is necessary to suffer for beauty. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we probably live by those words today, right? Suffer for beauty. Okay, so this is the information that this printed and painted calicos and the wool and silken manufacturers. That the printed and painted calicos now worn or used in Great Britain come under 4 denominations. All pernicious and destructive to our trade. Such as being imported by the Dutch, are either printed in the late Indies or in Holland and clandestinely run on shore here in spite of former prohibition, or such as being imported here by our own East India Company and prohibited to be worn because printed in India, are pretended to be exported, but are privately run on shore again and sold. Or such as being printed here are entered and shipped for exportation in order to draw back the duties on the stamps, but are relanded and sold here. And lastly, such as are printed here and legally worn and used and under the color of which all the other frauds are practiced and concealed. So there are 4 types of pernicious use of painted calicos. A pretty picture of English commercial morality in the 18th century, truly. In dealing with the printed cottons, the 18th century scribes showed a command of vituperation. There's a word for you to look up. Vituperation. 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 So scribes showed a command of vituperation that would make a cab driver sigh with envy. This from The Spinster by J. Roberts, 1719, is a mild example. Oh my God. A tawdry, pie-spotted, flabby, ragged, low-priced thing called calico, made by a parcel of heathens and pagans that worship the devil and work for a halfpenny a day. That might be the best chintz insult I've ever heard. It's a chintsult. I'm going to read that again to you guys. This is the chintsult. A tawdry, pie-spotted, flabby, ragged, low-priced thing called calico, made by a parcel of heathens and pagans that worship the devil and work for a halfpenny a day. Oh, you guys. All right, wait a minute. I gotta grab a page flag because I gotta come back to that. You know that's going on Instagram. And the best part, it's from something called The Spinster from 1719. In other words, our modern complaint against dumping and the dumpers. These extracts made still more clear what has already been emphasized of the 18th century. Although there were English prints, they were looked upon as a poor, cheap substitute for the imported goods, and the most admired cottons were the Indian calicos. Also, it is obvious that printers naturally copied the Indian cottons and did not attempt to make imitations of silks or brocades. And therefore, those buying modern chintz and cretonne, I can't remember how to pronounce that, to go with old furniture, should avoid prints which are imitations of damasks and velvets, even if the designs are copies of materials of the right period. The agitation against the use of prints at last reached a climax. The opponents of the calicos were victorious, and in 1720 there was passed an act prohibiting the use of all decorated cottons. It was entitled, oh dear God, they can't come up with like a simple title. This is the title of this act. An act to preserve and encourage the woolen and silken manufactures of this kingdom and for the more effective employment of the poor by prohibiting the use and wear of all printed, painted, stained, or dyed calicos in apparel, household stuff, furniture, or otherwise after the 25th day of December, 1722. This act ordained that no one whatever should expose for sale any printed, painted, stained, or dyed calico, or any bed, chair, cushion, window curtain, or other household stuff or furniture made up or mixed with any printed, painted, or stained calico for use in Great Britain. Can you imagine? 1722. No printed cotton. You're go to jail. The material prohibited was further defined as any stuff made of cotton or mixed therewith, which shall be printed or painted with any color or colors, or any calico stitched or flowered in foreign parts, with any color or colors, or with colored flowers. Wow. It is drab woolen jumpers for your lot. The denunciations of the law, however, had not much effect, and the fashionable world wore charming chintz while alive and was laid out in it when dead. Charming chintz. The act was modified in 1736 to allow mixed fabrics with a cotton warp to be used, and many printers availed themselves of this permission. It was evidently made an excuse for printing a certain amount of pure cotton, as there are examples of cottons which bear a date showing that they were printed during the Prohibition. The Puritans must have been thrilled. Yeah. Oh, thank goodness we can just grow our own cotton now. Probably well, and that's the thing. I mean, to sidestep into, this whole situation in England, we're pulling up on the 1700s when, cotton was getting started. Wasn't until much later in the century that really, in early 1800s, that cotton was really going strong here in the U.S. But you're seeing, these prohibitions because of, Great Britain being this superpower, and being involved in kerfuffles with everybody. And their, the empire, the colonialism of the empire, they had some cotton issues everywhere. Probably, however, the chintz mentioned below had a linen warp, as its acceptance was obviously owing to its native origin. And this is from Gentleman's Magazine, 14th March, 1754. Mr. Sedgwick, a very considerable wholesale trader in printed goods, had the honor to present Her Royal Highness Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales with a piece of English chintz of excellent workmanship printed on a British cotton, which, being of our own manufacture, Her Royal Highness was pleased to say she was very glad we had arrived at so great a perfection in the art of printing, and that, in her opinion, it was preferable to any Indian chintz whatsoever, and would give orders to have it made up into a garment for Her Highness's own wear, as an encouragement to the labor and ingenuity of this country. Now, the thing is, Great Britain, without their colonial, their outposts, they couldn't grow, the climate of England, with the exception of sea cotton, I believe, they didn't grow cotton. So that was the problem. To get cotton in England, you got to import it because they just, they weren't growing their own cotton. So, that's really what a lot of this is about. That the act was not entirely dead letter is, however, clearly proved by the fact that prosecutions were not uncommon. Even as late as 1768, on the verge of its repeal, on the 9th of August, 2 ladies were haled before the Lord Mayor and fined £5 for wearing chintz gowns. Wow. All right, so that is the chapter, The Pioneers of English Cotton Printing, wherein we have a chinsult and some people who really flout the rules. Now, next we will get into the Days of Freedom. Does this get into the U.S.? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Not yet. All right. Fascinating stuff. Yes, I will be putting that chinsult out there. Too funny. All right, you guys. It is just minutes before 4, and I have many, many things to do today. I wish Mondays could just be an extension of the weekend. And that things didn't want to happen on Mondays, but alas, they do. So I'm going to leave you to it. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and evening. And as always, I'm so pleased that you're here. I really appreciate you guys. And, I couldn't do this without you. And I hope you had fun today. And maybe I'll find some more some more weird stuff to be pawed through for another unboxing at another day. And like I said before, if you have a quilt you want to share, for our next quilt gossip. I would love you to share it. So I'm going to put the link in. Go. And with that said, I will see you tomorrow evening if you're following along with Jill and my reading of Legacy. And if not, I will see you next Thursday, or this coming Thursday, next Thursday. It'll be here before I know it. So, guys, have a wonderful afternoon and evening, and I will see you soon. Mwah!